Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another patch notes video for EVE Echoes, and this week we've got a bit of a doozy. Looks like there's a lot of interesting stuff coming, including, spoiler alert, carriers. So at the end of this video I am also going to do a little bonus section where we talk about what carriers are, how they might be operating, just to give you a bit of a head start when you go into tomorrow's event, because yeah, it's coming that soon. Now, as usual, if you enjoy this video, let me know by hitting a like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, you know the drill by now, check out the merchandise store, and of course come support me on Patreon if you can as well. Finally, for those of you who have shown some concern over the past couple of days of me not having put a video up, last week I was really badly suffering with uveitis, which made it very difficult to record. I took a bit of an extended weekend to recover from that. Then yesterday I spent most of the day listening to dogs barking and workers digging up our garden, because it looks like at long last, 14 months later, Zol are finally installing our Fibronics. Anyway, let's have a look at the patch notes then, load into them now. These are the patch notes for the 20th of October, 2021. Again, approximately 120 minutes to complete, going down at 0800 UTC plus 0. First things first, virtual test interference, carriers reporting for duty. From October the 20th through to October 27th, so only 1 week for this. As virtual test interference progresses, we see a huge breakthrough in capital ship technology. After the server maintenance on October 20th, 4 new carriers will debut in virtual test interference. The Chimera, which is the Caldari state, Nidhogger, which is the Minmatar Republic, the Amar Empire Archon, and the Galente Federation Thanatos. Players will be able to choose to pilot these 4 carriers in virtual test interference battles and try out the unique carrier fighter mechanic, which will no doubt introduce players to some thrilling combat between carriers. Check the in-game event rules for more details. Of course, I will be doing a video on this as well, so we can talk about what this all is. And as I said at the end of this video, I will have a brief look at all the different carriers as they are in EVE Online to give you a bit of sort of a preface going in, a bit of preparation before jumping in tomorrow. Crisis approaches, the tide rises, unveil the ship graveyard. This again is October 24th, not the 20th, October 24th through to November 3rd. The adversary from void space fans the flames of war to every corner of New Eden. To protect New Eden, Concord, together with the 4 empires, has called for pilots to venture into the Nihilus void space and eliminate the Interferer fleet. What secret do the Interferer shipwrecks hold? Defeat the fleet to increase the event progress, which is shown on the ship graveyard event page. With each third of progress being completed, combat difficulty will increase. Every time the event reaches a new stage, all pilots will receive great rewards. All unlocked rewards will remain claimable until November the 11th. This looks to be our Halloween event, and it looks like we're going to have some special Nihilus space here called ship graveyards, which kind of fits the ooky spooky Halloweeny theme. So ship graveyards are what we're going to be looking for as a form of Nihilus space. Go in there and take out Interferer fleets, and there'll be some really cool rewards from that. I imagine some Halloween skins, probably some things like SP, maybe even Plex and stuff like that, as we've seen from the Growth Fund and things like that. That would be pretty cool. There's also a warning here that the end of the Ship Data Test Manual event draws near. That will close on October 21st, and pilots must claim their unclaimed rewards in due time. This is the sort of mini battle pass going on at the moment. You will need to have claimed any rewards you want by the 21st of October. You have been warned. Anyway, let's look at some of the other optimizations then. Number 1, adjusted the premium factor of the material valuation formula. This, I think, is to do with how they're calculating insurance prices, etc. for ships. This is a good thing. Adjusted the premium factor of the material valuation formula. That to me looks like they are increasing how valuable ships are going to be for making insurance claims for the buy orders that insurance claims do. I could be completely wrong, and because of how vaguely that's worded, this could be something to do with all blueprints being, having more ore added to them, which is what we've been asking for a while, for like mining to be a bit of a thing. But the fact that it's adjusted the premium factor of the material valuation, to me suggests that that is a very good change to insurance that means those claims will actually be of higher value, so you will have bigger buy orders to fulfill, which is good for industry. Number 2, adjusted the function of the report button. This is if you've got someone being rude to you or you think they're hacking and things like that, you can report them for various behavioural traits. I don't know what the adjustment here is, but apparently it's going to be different. Number 3, changed part of the Dark Halo core's description. Warp Scramble range has been changed to Disruption Field range. This, if you remember when I did the video on Dark Halos, and when I talked about how these apply to the interceptors, for example, I was like, oh, it says scramble range there, but it's talking about interdiction sphere scramble range. Is that also affecting warp scramblers? No, we know for a fact, we tested it, it doesn't affect warp scramblers. Warp disruptors are an option, but the interdiction sphere options for, obviously when you put these cores onto an interdictor, it says scramble range, which is really confusing. It's not. They've reworded it now to disruption field range, which makes a lot more sense, because it is called an interdiction disruption field. So yeah, works. Number 4, after fitting a module, fitting another will record the listed location of the last one. This again is the whole thing of when you go to fit a ship, the modules actually move around your inventory properly, so you don't get that situation where if you're on a slightly slower connection and that you kind of fit a high slot, move on to the next one, fit another high slot, and it's either taking it out of the first one to put it in the second one, or it says, oh, it's not there anymore. This is just designed to help you with that. Number 5, added a close button to the search screen. Awesome, nice quality of life change. Saves you having to, swipe down and use your phone's back button to try and get out. Number 6, you can now switch the styles of the bottom panel of the main interface module button. Again, I have no idea what that is, but it sounds pretty cool. You can switch the styles of the bottom panel of the main interface module button. I'm kind of think this might be to do with like activatable modules. When you undock and you've got your modules there, you can change those around. That would be pretty cool. But I don't know. I really don't know. That is one of the vaguest and weirdest patch notes. I think we're going to come back tomorrow, have a look at that one and go, that's what that means. Number 7, added carriers to the virtual test. Dreadnoughts are still available, which I know is something a lot of people were worried about, that, the Dreadnoughts would disappear when carriers are added. Nope, you can fly the carriers and try those out. You can still also do the Dreadnoughts. Number 8, changed the non-player Dreadnoughts to carriers in the third wave of the test to test the combat capabilities of carriers when not controlled by a player. Now this is interesting because that insinuates to me that carriers and dreadnoughts may be coming into PvE at some point. We may see pirate carriers and dreadnoughts, and I'm a bit of a mixed bag on that. On one hand, it makes sense that any ship in the game theoretically can appear as a pirate ship as well, but on the other token, like, the anomalies that we're already doing are, can take a long time to do. And if you're going to add carriers and, dreadnoughts into those, it's going to just make content even harder. Unless we're looking at specific content like special event dead space anomalies and things like that, then who knows, that could be an interesting way of doing it, or special capital anomalies being added to the game. But I do hope we're not going to suddenly see carriers start appearing in Tech 10 anomalies and encounters. I don't know, maybe you disagree with me on that one. Number 8, no, we've just checked number 8, which brings us to bug fixes. Fix the issue where Nihilist space generation would fail under some circumstances, and fix the issue where the mission reward screen wouldn't disappear after the rewards were claimed. Typical bug fixes. So, what we have here are some nice little quality of life changes as far as the optimizations go, plus a couple of I don't actually know quite what that means, followed by us getting carriers in our new virtual test interference. Interference, by the way, is the name of the next patch, like the Sovereignty patch was called Indomitable. This is going to be interference. So it gives us an idea of what that patch is going to be called, not that it overly matters. But yeah, interference, virtual test interference is now going to have carriers in it as well that we can have fun with. We're going to get a Halloween event here called The Tide Rises with the ship graveyard, which just sounds awesome, and I can't wait to see what the rewards are for there and what that looks like. I'm hoping it's not just a Nihilist Dead Space, maybe it's a Nihilist Dead, even if it was just a palette swap, where instead of it being blue and purple, it's like red and orange and all evil looking like that. That would be really cool. I can dream, Harold. And yeah, remember, end of the ship dates test manual event draws near. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm particularly interested actually in carriers, because carriers are actually quite cool. So let's jump in and have a look at carriers and talk about them briefly, just to give you a bit of a primer of what to expect for tomorrow. Now, just as you may expect, and just like with Dreadnoughts, there are of course 4 carriers, one for each of the empires. There is the Amar Empire Archon, shown on screen now. the Galente Federation Thanos, the Kaldari State Chimera, and the Minmatar Republic Nidhogger. I actually quite like the look of the Nidhogger. It's typically Minmatar rugged and pretty badass looking there. The Kaldari State Chimera is quite long and thin and very angular, which I'm not a huge fan of. Please be aware as well, this sort of colour scheme you see here is a skin. This is a screenshot of a Chimera with a skin on it, so it will be slightly different colours. I just couldn't get a good quality image of the Chimera that didn't have the skin. The Thanatos, I quite like the look of this one as well. It's typical Galente, sort of off-center, asymmetric, but it's not as ugly as some of the Galente ships have been in the past. I think it definitely looks better than the Moros, their dreadnought. Finally then we have the Archon, which looks like someone flipped a coercer upside down, carved the bottom up, and then just made it huge. This is a big platform, and in fairness it does kind of look exactly as you would imagine a carrier to be. So what are carriers? Well, carriers are capital level ships, so the same size as dreadnoughts and freighters. You'll build them using components, not just straight up, oh, here's the ores and that you need, and then here's the blueprint and off you go. You'll be building the individual components, then using a blueprint to combine those components into the ship itself. And they use fighters. Now, fighters are kind of like, basically you could describe them as drones that are the size of a frigate. Their signature radius is actually more aligned with cruiser and destroyer sort of signature radius, but for the actual size of the ship itself, it is a frigate-sized ship, and they have weapon systems, primary and secondary weapon systems. You can kind of think of them as drones. You do sort of use them like drones to attack onto a certain target. Interestingly though, in EVE Online, if someone manages to warp out of a fight, carriers, drones will stop doing their thing. Fighters, on the other hand, will actually chase after someone if they enter warp. They're capable of warping themselves and will continue to fight at the other end, which means sometimes the only way to escape a carrier is to completely leave the entire system that you're in. Now, as you'd expect, there is of course a difference between all four empires of versions of the carriers, and I've kind of brought this up here courtesy of EVE University's wiki, and here you can see that we have the Archon gets a bonus to armor resistances and a bonus to the Cenobite support fighter with its neutralization optimal range. The Cenobite has its standard lasers for its main fighter system, and then its secondary weapon is an energy neutralizer that kind of pulses and just knocks everyone's capacitor off, and it is very powerful at lead war frigate. Plus, it's got a 1% bonus to armoured command and information command burst, strength and duration, because yes, the carriers can fit command burst modules as well, just like command destroyers and most battle cruisers, which is pretty cool. They can usually fit 2 different types as well, and they'll have bonuses for those side by side. The Chimera gets 4% bonus to all shield resistances, so it's a very tanky carrier, and a 5% bonus to the Kaldari one, which is the Scarab support fighter with its ECM. Now, ECM doesn't exist in EVE Echoes, so I'm interested to see what that is going to be here moved across to EVE Echoes, because of course these other skills will translate across pretty accurately. Like I imagine that the Archon will still have armor resistance bonus and the Chimera will have shield resistances. But obviously ECM is not a bonus that the Chimera should have, because ECM doesn't exist in EVE Echo, so I don't know what that will be. Guidance disruption seems to be the standard thing on the side, so who knows, maybe Scarab support fighters have guidance disruptors now. I genuinely don't know. And then bonus to shield command and information command. Again, information command don't exist in EVE Echo, so that will probably be a bonus to skirmish command. The Galente Thanatos is a straight-up bonus to fighter damage, so your fighters do more damage from the Thanatos and have higher health, 2.5% bonus to fighter hit points, and a 5% bonus to the Siren support fighter warp disruption range, because, yes, they have warp disruptors, which, if you're wondering why I don't like carriers, you're beginning to see it, I hope, now, because, oh look, I've got a load of drones, basically, that can disrupt you. In addition to the fleet of guys around me that are also, it's crazy. It's crazy. They're awesome, but kind of, I mean that in the literal of like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. And again, Armoured Command and Skirmish Command for the Thanatos. Finally, the Nidhogger gets again a 5% bonus to damage, and this time to fighter velocity, so the ability to maneuver a little bit faster, typical Minmatar. And the Dromi support fighter gets stasis webification additional range, and a 1% bonus to shield command and skirmish command. there. Now, fighters, as I said, they've got sort of a primary weapon system and a secondary weapon system, and they kind of come in a couple of different flavors in EVE Online as well. You have sort of light fighters and heavy fighters. Light fighters are used against sub-capitals, and heavy fighters are used against capital ships. You then get long-range and short-range versions. One, for example, the Minmatar short-range fighters use autocannons, the long-range fighters use howitzers, what would be strike cannons in EVE Echoes. You get ECM fighters as well, electronic warfare fighters as well that do that kind of thing. So I'd like to see the E-War fighters are a thing. I think that'd be really, really cool. From what we know, from what Melos said during the live stream event back in May when they first talked about this, it looks like we are going to get like two types of fighters that each ship can launch, but instead of it being sub-capital and capital, it looks like they're going to be frigate and destroyer and cruiser. That's how he described it in the thing, that there was going to be a type of fighter specifically designed for taking out frigates and destroyers, and a second type of fighter specifically designed for taking out cruisers, and I suppose by extension battle cruisers, but we'll see. That remains to be seen, and I suppose we will find out tomorrow. But just to give you an idea of what we would expect based on EVE Online, how these could look going into tomorrow's interference test, that's it right there. So the Archon is all about its resistances, as is the Chimera, whereas the Thanatos and the Nidhogger are instead a bit less tanky, but more about dealing the damage. That's pretty cool. As for looks, as I said, I personally really quite like the Nidhogger. To me, that looks exactly what you'd expect a Minmatar carrier to look like: rugged, angular, straight to the point. The Caldari one, the Chimera there, very angular, it's typically Caldari, I just don't like it all that much. The Thanatos, again, actually one of the ones I don't mind the look of. Galente sort of design at its finest, I think. And again, the Archon there for the Amar Empire in all its just overwhelming shininess. Anyway, let me know which of these you think you're going to be piloting. Is there a particular one you're looking forward to more than the others? Personally, I'll obviously be testing the Nidhogger first, and we'll see how it goes from there. I'll be interested to see how the stats and how the fighter interface actually carries across to EVE Echoes. Come back here tomorrow, let me know what you think of the fighters and all that as well. I'll be putting out a video, obviously, regarding virtual test interference carriers, and we'll talk about what those carriers are like, how they operate, and we can go from there. Anyway, folks, thank you for listening to this one right the way through to the end. Sorry, I'm a little bit bunged up still, throat's still a bit sore, still recovering, but hey, we're back on form, and hopefully I should have fibre optic internet soon. Thanks for watching right the way to the end, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!